I never believed in the paranormal, not until Eliza came into my life. It started innocuously enough, a trip to a dusty antique shop on the outskirts of town. My best friend, Sarah, had always been fascinated by old things, the kind that carried history in their scratches and dents. I tagged along more out of boredom than interest. The shop was dimly lit, with a peculiar smell of musty wood and forgotten memories. We wandered through aisles of tarnished silverware, faded books, and outdated trinkets until Sarah spotted a doll. She was perched on a high shelf, surrounded by other long-abandoned toys. But unlike the others, this doll seemed different. She was about a foot tall, with porcelain skin so pale it almost glowed. Her eyes were a deep, glassy blue, framed by long, dark lashes. She wore a tattered lace dress that might have been white once but had long since turned a dull, yellowish hue. Her hair was a mess of tangled brown curls, but it was the eyes that drew me in, eyes that seemed almost alive. Sarah, of course, was enchanted. She insisted on buying the doll, despite my protests. "It's just a doll," she said with a shrug. "What's the harm?" We took Eliza back to Sarah's apartment. From the moment we set her down on the living room shelf, things began to change. It was subtle at first, just a shift in the atmosphere, a chill in the air that hadn't been there before. Then came the noises. At night, when the apartment was silent, I would hear soft footsteps, like the patter of tiny feet across the wooden floor. I dismissed it as my imagination until Sarah mentioned it too. "Do you hear that?" she asked one night, her voice trembling slightly. I nodded. "It's just the building settling," I lied, not wanting to admit that I was scared too. But it wasn't just the noises. Eliza seemed to move when we weren't looking. We would leave her facing one way, only to return and find her staring in a different direction. Once, I swear I saw her blink. It was impossible, I told myself. Dolls don't blink. Things escalated quickly after that. Sarah started waking up with scratches on her arms, as if something with tiny, sharp nails had clawed at her in the night. She became irritable, paranoid, convinced that Eliza was watching her, watching us. I decided to take matters into my own hands. One night, after Sarah had gone to bed, I crept into the living room. Eliza sat on the shelf, her eyes following me as I approached. My heart pounded in my chest, but I forced myself to reach out and grab her. As soon as my fingers touched her porcelain skin, a searing pain shot through my hand. I dropped the doll with a gasp, cradling my hand to my chest. It felt like I had been burned, but there was no mark, no sign of injury. Eliza lay on the floor, her eyes staring up at me with that same unnerving intensity. I wanted to destroy her, but every time I tried, something stopped me. The knife would slip from my hand, or the lighter would refuse to ignite. It was as if the doll had a will of her own, a dark, malevolent force that wouldn't allow me to harm her. Sarah's condition worsened. She stopped eating, stopped sleeping, her eyes hollow and sunken. She whispered to Eliza, words I couldn't understand, like she was speaking in a language that wasn't her own. It was as if the doll had taken control of her, draining her life away. One night, I awoke to a strange noise coming from the living room. I crept out of bed, my heart hammering in my chest. There, in the dim light, I saw Sarah standing in front of the shelf, her back to me. She was holding Eliza, cradling the doll like a child. "Sarah," I called out softly. She didn't respond, didn't move. I took a step closer, and that's when I saw it. Eliza's eyes, they weren't glass anymore. They were real human eyes, gleaming with a malevolent intelligence. And they were staring right at me. "She likes you," Sarah whispered, her voice hollow. "She wants you to stay with us." Before I could react, Sarah turned around, and I saw that her eyes, her beautiful green eyes, were gone. Empty sockets stared back at me, blood trickling down her cheeks. I screamed, stumbling backward, but it was too late. I felt something cold and sharp at my neck, and then everything went black. When I woke up, I was in the hospital. They told me that Sarah was dead, that she had taken her own life. But I know the truth. Eliza killed her. Eliza took her eyes, her soul, and now she's coming for me. The days after Sarah's death were a blur. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of Eliza's presence lurking just out of sight. I tried to convince myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me, a way to cope with the trauma. But the feeling only grew stronger, and soon, I couldn't ignore it. I moved back into my old apartment, hoping that putting distance between myself and Sarah's place would help me forget. But Eliza followed me. I don't know how, but she did. It started with small things at first. My keys disappearing, lights flickering, doors opening on their own. Then the nightmares began. I would wake up in a cold sweat, heart racing, with the image of Eliza's eyes burned into my mind. In the dreams, I was trapped in darkness, her voice whispering in my ear, her hands cold against my skin. She wanted something from me, something I wasn't willing to give. One night, I woke up to find Eliza sitting at the foot of my bed. My heart nearly stopped. She was there, in the flesh, her lifeless eyes locked onto mine. I bolted upright, but when I reached out to push her away, my hands passed through thin air. She was gone, leaving only the lingering scent of old lace. I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to confront the doll, to end this nightmare once and for all. I went back to Sarah's apartment, hoping to find Eliza and destroy her. The place had been left untouched since Sarah's death, her belongings still strewn about as if she had just stepped out. When I entered the living room, there she was, sitting on the shelf as if nothing had happened. But something was different. Her eyes, they were darker now, almost black, and they seemed to follow me as I moved around the room. I grabbed her off the shelf and threw her into a trash bag, determined to rid myself of her once and for all. I drove to the edge of town, to an old abandoned quarry, and tossed the bag into the deepest pit. I watched as the bag tumbled down the rocky slope and disappeared into the shadows below. But it wasn't over. That night, I woke up to the sound of something rustling in the corner of my room. My heart pounded in my chest as I slowly turned on the light, praying it was just my imagination. But it wasn't. Eliza was sitting on the chair in the corner, her eyes gleaming in the dim light, her hands resting on her tiny lap. The bag was nowhere to be seen. I scrambled out of bed, but before I could make it to the door, the room plunged into darkness. The air grew thick, oppressive, as if the walls were closing in on me. I felt her cold fingers brush against my neck, her voice whispering in my ear, "You can't get rid of me. You belong to me now." Panic surged through me, and I lunged for the door, but something held me back. I was paralyzed, unable to move as Eliza's presence wrapped around me like a vice. My vision blurred, and I felt myself slipping away, her voice the last thing I heard before everything went black. I don't know how long I was out, but when I woke up, I was in the hospital again. The doctors told me I had been found unconscious in my apartment. No signs of a break-in, no explanation for what had happened. They chalked it up to stress, maybe even a nervous breakdown. But I knew better. Eliza had claimed me just as she had claimed Sarah. And now she was a part of me. Everywhere I go, I see her out of the corner of my eye. Her reflection in mirrors, her shadow in the corners of rooms, her whisper in the dead of night. I can't escape her. She's always there, waiting, watching. I can't sleep, can't eat, can't think straight. The doctors want to keep me here for observation, but I know it's only a matter of time before Eliza comes for me again. And this time, I don't think I'll be able to resist her. I've tried to warn people, tried to tell them about the doll, but no one believes me. They think I'm crazy, delusional. Maybe I am, but I know what I saw. I know what Eliza is capable of. And now she's calling to me again. I can hear her voice, soft and sweet, telling me to come to her. I can see her eyes, those cold, lifeless eyes, staring at me from across the room. I don't know how much longer I can hold out. If anyone finds this, if anyone reads this, please don't go looking for Eliza. Don't bring her into your home. She's not just a doll. She's something else, something dark, something evil. And once she has you, she never lets go. I'm writing this now because I know I don't have much time left. Eliza's here, right beside me, her tiny hand resting on my shoulder. I can feel her breath on my neck, hear her laughter in my ear. She's waiting for me to finish, waiting for me to finally give in. I can't fight her anymore. I'm tired, so tired. Maybe it's better this way. Maybe it's better to let her take me, to let her end this torment. But I'm scared. Scared of what will happen next, of what Eliza will do once she has me. Scared of the darkness that awaits. She's whispering to me now, telling me it's time to go. I can't resist her any longer. I'm sorry, Sarah. I'm sorry I couldn't save you. I'm sorry I brought this upon us. If anyone ever finds Eliza, if she ever crosses your path, burn her. Destroy her. Do whatever it takes to get rid of her. Don't let her take anyone else. This is my final warning. She's here, and she's never leaving.